Hey guys, we need more subscribers for our Patreon. Get involved with our Patreon subscription and you can suggest videos just like this. This video has actually come from our producer, Yolanda. She is about to have a baby and she's craving pineapple buns. So here we have a pineapple bun, my takeaway for your fakeaway for this weekend. I've actually got way more ingredients than I need here. I've got 3 times the dough amount for this recipe. And the reason for that is that this dough is just so versatile and flexible for doing all types of different dishes. So I'm making different dishes for different videos using the same dough. There's a few things, nice tips for when you're making this sort of Chinese or Hong Kong style bread dough and any sort of yeast dough really. You know, if you have been to Hong Kong, you get this sort of these bakeries, these really traditional Cantonese bakeries with almost like a brioche bun or dough, and you've got lots of different types of fillings or toppings, whether sweet or savoury. Start with the flour. I've got strong bread flour, classic strong bread flour. As I say, I've got 3 times the amount, so normally it'd be about 400 grams. Got some butter or margarine, that'll work. Fast action dried yeast. Now, a lot of people, when they use sort of dry yeast like this, you'd sort of tend to pour a bit of warm water into the yeast and allow it to sort of bubble up after sort of 10-15 minutes. I was actually taught this recipe by my uncle Ken, who is a professional baker, and he's kind of, let's just throw it all in. So that's what we're going to do. The sugar will help to feed the yeast, but it's also quite a sweet sort of brioche style bun. So there's a fair amount of sugar there. That's caster sugar, salt, and then warm water. And my tip here is really warm to the touch, so it should feel slightly on the hotter side when you dip your finger into your water than sort of lukewarm. And that means that will just help with the sugar to activate the yeast better. Most importantly, I would recommend to weigh everything out, including the water. Don't just rely on sort of eye measurements of the water. The weighing out just helps this along. We're going to pretty much put all the dry ingredients along with the butter into the mixer first, and then put it on a low speed just to mix that butter into the dry ingredients before I add my water. Depending on how cold your butter is, it might take your machine, if you're using a machine, a little while to sort of get that breadcrumb feeling. So if you want to speed it up, take your mixing bowl out and then just run your hands through, or your palms through that flour, and just using your fingertips and your palms, get that butter well mixed into to get this sort of breadcrumby texture. Now with this amount of ingredients in here, it's going to be pretty full, but you know, you guys are going to probably have a third of the ingredients. More importantly, when you add your water into the mix, I would add sort of half the amount of water first and then gradually add the rest of it until you've used it all up. You want this dough to be nice and tacky. So add that in, gradually add your water. If you're going to use a machine like I'm doing, low speed first. Once all that flour is picked up by the water, then whack out to a high speed and keep beating that dough until it's really nice and sort of elastic. Lastly, you can of course just use your hands to knead the dough, but you're going to probably, if you're sort of my size, then maybe it'll take sort of 10-15 minutes to knead. So my dough should feel nice and warm with that warm water. And that is why I use a machine. You can see this strong bread flour and how, well, that really does feel nice and warm. You can see how elastic this dough is. It's always good to give it a few kneads by hand, even if you're using a machine. More than anything, to just understand the texture of your dough and how it should be. You can see when I pull that apart how elastic that is. So at this point, I'm going to split this into my 3 pastries now for my 3 different recipes, and then I'll carry on with my bol or bao, my pineapple buns, which actually, they're called pineapple buns, but they have no pineapple in it. The whole point of a pineapple bun is I'm going to make another sort of rough dough. It's kind of more like a crumble that goes over the top, this sweet crumble, and we'll make it kind of look like the outside of a pineapple, and that's where it gets its name from. So you want to oil your bowl once you've made a sort of round ball of dough, and just sit that ball of dough in its oil, and then cover it with a clean, damp tea towel. So you want to let that rest for about an hour and a half to 2 hours in a warm, dry place. So whilst that's resting, we've got plenty of time to make up our crumble topping for this sort of pineapple-esque look. And so I've got butter and sugar that I'm going to get onto a sort of low to medium speed first. And we're sort of making a sugary paste out of this. So your butter and sugar mix, you want to sort of beat on a medium speed until it's sort of like a thick buttercream. So not too fluffy, but all nicely combined. Once you're at that point, crack an egg in and then whisk it nice and quickly so that it's sort of one smooth paste. I've got some vanilla extract. I'm going to add to that. And just stir that around the butter mix. And you can, at this point, if you want to go for classic Hong Kong style, then put a couple of drops of yellow food colouring in, and that will just sort of make the top of it sort of even more pineapple looking. We're going to skip that step. It's not 100% necessary. I've got plain flour and self-raising flour here because I want the crumble mix to puff up a little and almost crack over the top of the buns. Just sieve those both in. Now, this part here is better to do by hand, or if you are going to use the machine, to do it on a really low speed. I'd rather mix it in by hand. I'm creating that crumble here, and I will bring this together like a dough in a second. So once you mix that all in, it creates that sort of crumble texture, and then you want to sort of just mould it into a rough ball of dough. You can squeeze into it a fair amount. I'm pretty much there. You can cover it in cling film, let that sit until your actual dough, the bread dough, has risen enough, and you're going to shake that, and then we'll use this as a topping. So my dough has been resting for a good hour and a half to 2 hours. And it should be doubled in size. So I'm just getting my egg wash ready, and that's to help stick the crumble topping over the top of each shaped ball of dough that I'll make in a second, but also to egg wash the top. You can see the dough. Whoa, look at that. Great looking dough. Nice, it should be nice and airy now. And you can see all those little air bubbles in the dough itself. So I'm going to make 6 pieces out of this. And this stage, it's kind of like knocking your bread back. You don't want it too sort of layered in texture, but you want a smooth ball of dough. So I'm just pushing in with my thumb and pinching, twisting in that dough back together, and then give it a roll if need be. So 4 or 5 times, just pushing in and pinching it back together, and then squeezing that into a nice smooth ball of dough. And pineapple buns don't usually have any filling inside, but you can get sort of a coconut custard filling version of it. But I'm just gonna, once they're cooked, do the classic Hong Kong thing and get a big knob of butter, cut it in half and put it in the center. So what this sort of pinching and twisting is doing is creating a bit of a skin around the outside of the dough. And it almost protects the bread a little, forms a slight crust. So we will rise this again for another half hour once I've shaped it all and put the crumble topping over the top. So I'm going to pop the balls of dough onto my greaseproof paper. As I said, there's one that's slightly uneven, but the rest of them look okay. And then I've got my crumble topping here. There's probably way too much here, so let's take half first and deal with that. You can use the rest for making simple cookies with, if you wish. Some flour. Just press into that to help you start to roll that out in a second. And then start to roll it out. So you want a sort of 2 to 3 millimeter thickness bit of crumble dough, and then have a round cutter that's about 1 centimeter sort of wider in diameter to the actual balls of dough. And I'm cutting one for each of my bol or bao, my pineapple buns. And then what you want to do is just lightly sort of draw a hashtag social media, like. That was the smoothest like my social media I've done, I think. Like so. Once you've got your crisscross onto your pastry, just brush the dough with egg wash. And all this time your dough will be rising or again. So you're just giving it that time to become more and more airy. And then just carefully take your topping and let that sit over the top. This crumble just sticks on nicely there. Now, I've been quite generous with the amount of topping, so the thickness of that topping, because that's where all the flavour is, you see. So I'm going to brush these pineapple buns with an egg wash now, and then allow them to rest for another half hour before I then brush them again and bake them. So you want to cover that with a damp cloth or some cling film again, half an hour before I bake them. So these guys have a good amount of time to rest and sort of rise a little bit again. So now you want to egg wash the tops once more. You can see that rising nicely. So I've gone quite generous with this double egg wash here, and that's just to give it a good glaze. Oven's on 180 degrees, 15 to 20 minutes, and then they should come out really nice and golden brown. My bol or bao, my pineapple buns. Look at that, golden brown, got that crustiness on the top. Looking great, and that's cracking nicely there to give it that sort of pineapple-y-ish sort of feeling. These are piping hot, so I'm not going to bite into them straight away. So, classic Hong Kong style. To slice it in half with a big knob of butter. We do have a bread knife, but that's not going to work. I was just trying to show off there. Right. And whilst it's still piping hot, then you get that big knob of butter. Let that melt. It's nice when it's just sort of still solid, that butter. This is a real Hong Kong way to do it, and you have a nice sort of, oh, that's good, Hong Kong milk tea on the side. You guys haven't made me my cup of tea. Oh, that was amazing. It really takes me back to Hong Kong. My childhood. I grew up, I was in and out of Hong Kong and UK, but I had a list of different dishes that you'd have to eat on the first day arriving in Hong Kong. This is one of them. This is just a snack, you know. Guys, fantastic suggestion from our wonderful producer, Yolanda. She had a craving for pineapple buns. She asked us to make them. She's not going to get them because I ate them all. But don't forget, guys, to subscribe to our Patreon channel so that you can suggest brilliant recipes like this and I will cook them for you, my Fakeaway, for your takeaway.